The Dog of Tithwal by Saadat Hassan Manto. First of all, let's have a look onto the details of the writer Saadat Hassan Manto. He was a colonial Indian and Pakistani writer and he wrote mainly in Urdu language. When we examine his works, it's clear that his works were based on the tragedies and cruelties of India-Pakistan partition, and so they were controversial. Now let's check which are his major works. They are Toba Take Singh, Tandakosh, Boo, Kholdo, Kali Shalwar, and Hatak. The Dog of Tithwal is also one of his most celebrated short stories. The short story, The Dog of Tithwal, is a satire about a stray dog caught in the tensions of India-Pakistan partition. And what is a satire then? Satire is the use of humor to attack a person, an idea, or a behavior that is considered to be bad or silly. In this short story, Manto depicts the most savage episode in the subcontinent's history, that is, the tragedy during the India-Pakistan partition. Through the symbolic representation of a stray dog, Manto expresses the tragic condition of millions of families that were made homeless by partition. The identity crisis that prevailed in the period is shown throughout the story. And most important to note, the story is set in the Tithwal mountain. Tithwal is a small border village in the Indian Union territory of Jammu and Kashmir, and it can be considered as the boundary of India and Pakistan. Now let's begin the summary of the story. The story begins on a pristine landscape with sweet-smelling flowers and chirping birds that hover over the flowers. Both Indian and Pakistani soldiers are settled on their respective fronts. The sounds of firing can be heard frequently from both the sides, even though there is no harm to anyone. There is no danger because they are in a safe place secured by huge rocks on which the bullets collide without hurting the soldiers. At nights, the soldiers lay asleep, ready to fight and die for the country at any time. The smell of the flowers fades and the atmosphere is filled with the smell of the pine resins, which is also not so unpleasant. Late at midnight, Corporal Hanam Singh, who is the captain of the Indian Army, looked onto the sky and seeing the stars, started singing a song about the star-spangled shoes. And he was deeply affected by the thoughts of his beloved. Realizing that he will not sleep again, Hanam Singh woke the others, and Banda Singh, who is one among the younger soldiers, started singing the song of Heer Ranja, a tragic Punjabi love story. Through this song, he conveyed that a lost lover cannot be pacified by anyone, and a hawk who lost a crane to the crow is like a fakir who gave up all his possessions and became an unwanted sage. After the song, a melancholic and silent atmosphere prevailed. But suddenly, the barking of a dog disturbed the silence, and from the bushes, Banda Singh found a stray dog. And Banda Singh told that it is Chapad Junjun. Everyone laughed and Hanam Singh caressed the dog and threw it a biscuit, but before the dog could take it, he took it back, asking whether by any chance it is a Pakistani dog. The dog stood wagging its tail. Everyone were laughing and Banda Singh replied that it was an Indian dog. And then Hanam Singh asked the dog for a sign proving its identity as an Indian, for which again the dog wagged its tail. When asked for an identity, the dog was helpless and it can do nothing other than wagging its tail. But Hanam Singh refused to take it as a sign, as every dogs wag their tails. The question of identity of the dog stood as a piece of comedy and entertainment among the soldiers. One of the soldiers said, dogs too had now better make up their minds as to whether they are Indian or Pakistani. This single statement includes the whole idea of identity crisis. The next morning, the soldiers provided food for the dog, caressed it, and tried to befriend it. All of them called it by the name Chapad Junjun. Now the scene shifts to the Pakistani front, and there Captain Himmat Khan is twisting his moustache, which has several stories to be told. Here, the youngest and the one having the sweetest sound, Bashir, is singing, "Where, darling, did you pass the night? Darling, where?" It is then Himmat Khan caught the sight of the stray dog and he shouted, asking where it had been all the night. The dog simply wagged its tail, which enraged the captain. He shouted about its uselessness, that it cannot do anything except wagging its tail. It was then Bashir noticed a piece of cardboard tied round the dog's neck, which carried the words, "Chapat Junjun, this is an Indian dog." There was a kind of confusion and worry among the soldiers, and they smelled something serious behind the words. After a series of discussions and threatening the dog, Himmat Khan decided to replace the words with something else that could be a reply to those words. He gave Bashir a cigarette packet and asked him to write something on it to tie it on the dog's neck. Thinking for a while, he wrote, "Sapat Zunzun, this is a Pakistani dog." Everyone appreciated Bashir for finding the best words that can be the answer to Chapat Junjun. The captain tied it to the dog's neck and warned him to not betray us. Keep in mind that the punishment for betrayal is death. And you people, please think for a while whether this statement is to be told to a stray dog. And again, Himmat Khan ordered the dog to take the message to their enemies. And he directed the dog towards the opposite friend and fired a shot into the air. And now we are shown the opposite friend, and the soldiers are discussing about the dog, and it was then it came there. And very interestingly, they yelled, "He's coming!" Hanam Singh observed through his binoculars and identified the rope still tied to its neck. He took aim and fired, seeing that the dog is coming from the enemy side. And hearing the sound of the shot, the dog froze in alarm. Himmat Khan too was observing the dog through his binoculars, and seeing the dog running towards him in fear, he fired another shot, yelling, "The brave are not afraid, turn back." And soon after, both the sides made efforts to turn the dog to the opposite side, and the confused dog started running to and fro in panic. The corporal lost his temper when he saw the dog running towards him, and he took careful aim and fired, by which the dog was injured on its leg. When the dog dragged its leg and ran towards the Pakistani friend, Himmat Khan too was infuriated, and he cried, "The brave care not for wounds, stake your life, go thither." And finally, the shot by Hanam Singh killed the poor dog, who was trapped in the troubles of partition. Both the sides expressed their mere sympathy for the martyr. And here comes the end of the dog and end of the story. Now, while discussing the major themes of the story, we come across identity crisis, India-Pakistan partition, conflict, ignorance, pride, and struggle. The identity crisis and India-Pakistan partition is very clear throughout the story, that is depicted through the trauma of the dog. And we see the conflict between India and Pakistan, between sympathy and arrogance, and between rationality and pride. The sympathy towards the fellow beings and the animals is won over by the arrogance of the soldier. And again, the pride of the soldiers wins over the rationality. And again, we see the pride of the soldiers in particular and of the human beings in general as one of the major themes of the short story. And through the struggle of the dog depicted throughout the story, we come across the struggle of thousands of men who are left homeless during the partition, who are left to face all the brutalities and tragedies of life. And again, we see the ignorance of men, the ignorance towards morality and the ignorance towards righteous action. And here I am concluding my video, and feel free to contact me for clearing your doubts. Hope you all have been beneficial with my video, and stay tuned for my next video. Thank you all and have a nice day.